And I do wonder sometimes, like I actually have no idea whether or not, as religiosity has gone down in North America, for example, whether or not truth speaking has gone up or down. You know, like it's a big question I have. Like I think about, if I truly believed that if I lied I would be going to hell, would I be less likely to lie? You know,
I think that
it's a big question.
yeah, I think it's a big question. I think it's a good question. I also think that, it's important to do certain things. Certain things are good, but you can do good things for the wrong reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's possible to be telling the truth because you're scared of hellfire. And I think that that's like not a good reason to be telling the truth.
Right.
And for that same fear, if you have that same fear, you're likely to tell a lie. You're just as likely to tell a lie for fear of hellfire.
I think this is key. This question of fear versus love is
Yeah.
super key, right?
Yeah.
And I remember doing an interview years ago with Miguel de Escoto, who was a priest who became the president of the United Nations General Assembly, and he was, at the time, it was 2009. Obama had been in office for a year or so, and he was criticizing Obama, and then he stopped and he said, "I just want to be clear." You know, he said this in his own Catholic way, that I criticize President Obama from a place of love.
But criticism is the prerogative, or should be the prerogative, only of those who love. Those who love, though, whoever or whatever they are criticizing. If we don't, we will exaggerate, and God will not use our criticism as a help to change mindsets, for example.
This point you're talking about coming up from a place of fear versus a place of love, I think is super central. And I think you'll find both those schools within religions.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I add one more element to it, just getting into sort of playing some of the newer ideas around psychology and around understanding our conception of reality. Truth is subjective, and again, Jordan knows this. So truth is about an internal personal experience quite often for each of us. And so apart from love and fear is one thing. Also, the assertion of truth, our truth, is important so that we can have a shared truth, so that we can sort of chip away at each other, we can challenge each other, we can improve each other's understanding, so that our shared truth can be one that works for all of us. And so that's another way to look at it, where I think, and that way, again, it's not, that one's rooted in an effort for love and try to understand each other versus some kind of fearful, traditional religious conception of like why we tell truth,
Yeah. And this speaks to another thing that I think is strong in Peterson's work that I think is really important for everybody to take in. And it's not, and again, like, Maz mentioned too, it's not everything he says is original to him. And he doesn't always do a good job of citing, although sometimes he definitely does. And apparently this comes a lot from Jung, but I have a feeling it probably exists before Jung. I'm sure it goes way back, but just this concept of knowing your shadow.
There was a lesson to learn from the Holocaust. We're always reminded that. Never forget. We've learned our lesson. There's a lesson to be learned. It's like, okay, fair enough, man. What was the lesson? That's the question. What was the lesson? And the lesson is, you're the Nazi. If you were there, that would have been you. You think, well, I'd be Oskar Schindler. I'd be rescuing the Jews. It's like, no, I'm afraid not.
Yeah,
You'd at least not be saying anything. Right. And you might also be actively participating. You might also enjoy it. You never know. Jung didn't believe that you could be a good person until you realized your capacity for evil. I don't mean acted it out in the world.
But understand that it's possible.
Well, not only understand it, but then to bring it under your control. You see, because there's a big difference between someone who's naive and is a good person. They're naive, they're a good person because they can't not be. They're like a domesticated house cat. There's nothing, they don't even have the capacity to be bad. So there's no morality in that. The morality comes when you're a monster and you can control it. And that's the Jungian encounter with the shadow.
Being very aware of like in what situations you're at your worst. And and when you have feelings of resentment, and what that brings out, and what that looks like when you talk about politics, and what that looks like when you talk about other groups of people. I think this is really key. I think it's important to have those, and I think it also speaks to a loss of kind of like loving places that are disappearing. There was like a big study done in the 90s, I remember, about like how much less people in North America were like getting together to celebrate, to dance, to play sports together, to do all these things to keep their hearts afloat. And if you replace all those activities, those community building activities that make you feel good, that make you feel like you're part of something bigger, that put you in touch with friends and all that stuff, and you replace all that with social media activity, where outrage is like one of the most common things you'll see on there. No matter how many cat videos you watch, it's not going to be able to replace the feeling of community you had playing sports or at church or dancing or playing music or whatever these things were that we used to do for centuries, or for thousands of years. And so I think it's we're a little bit out of balance, and in that situation, a lot of negative emotions arise, and that causes us to sometimes exaggerate and speak untruths about other people and about our so-called enemies or our opponents, politically and otherwise.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we're still going through it. We're still in the process of, but this social media period, which is still relatively, I mean, not even relatively, this is a new thing. This is a new phenomenon.
You can make an argument that humanity still hasn't adjusted to the television set. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
Like we're still in or even radio or something, like we're still in the post radio, post television,
so technological,
reacting to that, and then the internet comes, and next we'll have VR, and